Have you ever wondered how billionaires buy $100 million yachts without actually spending their money? Or how wealthy people seem to acquire endless assets while their bank accounts keep growing? Here's something that might blow your mind. Rich people have figured out how to buy things without ever really paying for them. I'm not talking about credit cards or payment plans. I'm talking about a completely different system. A system where the things you buy actually make you richer instead of poorer. Where ownership doesn't cost you anything. Where assets pay for themselves and then some. Here at Simple Money, we've studied how wealthy people actually operate. And the gap between how rich people buy things and how everyone else buys things is absolutely staggering. Today, I'm going to reveal the 5 strategies wealthy people use to acquire assets without depleting their wealth. And I promise you, this is going to change how you think about buying things forever. So here's what's really happening. When most people want to buy something expensive, they save up money. Then they hand that money over. And the money is gone. That's it. Transaction complete. But wealthy people play a completely different game. They've figured out how to acquire things while keeping their capital intact. Or even better, they acquire things that generate more capital than they cost. Think about it this way. Imagine you want a car that costs $50,000. The normal approach is to save $50,000 and buy the car. Now you have a car and $50,000 less than you started with. But here's what a wealthy person might do instead. They take that $50,000 and put it somewhere that generates income. Maybe it earns $5,000 per year. Then they use that $5,000 to make payments on the car. The car gets paid off in 10 years. And at the end, they still have the original $50,000, plus they own the car. Same car, completely different financial outcome. One person spent their capital. The other person used their capital to generate income that bought the car for them. And this is just the beginning. This principle scales to everything. Houses, businesses, investments, art, everything. Wealthy people touch somehow generates more wealth instead of depleting it. The first strategy is what I call the asset swap. And once you understand this, you'll see it everywhere. Here's how it works. Wealthy people almost never convert cash into possessions. Instead, they convert one asset into another asset. Let me give you a concrete example. A regular person wants to buy a vacation home for $500,000. They save up $500,000 in cash and buy the house. Now they own a house, but their savings are gone. A wealthy person approaches this completely differently. They already own assets that generate income. Maybe rental properties, maybe stocks, maybe a business. These assets are throwing off cash every single month. So instead of spending their savings, they simply redirect the income from their existing assets. The rental properties generate $15,000 per year. The stock dividends add another $10,000. Their business throws off another $15,000. That's $40,000 per year they didn't have to work for. They use that $40,000 to make mortgage payments on the vacation home. In 15 years, the vacation home is paid off. But here's the magic part. They still own all the original assets. The rental properties, the stocks, the business. Nothing was depleted. They didn't buy a vacation home with their money. They bought it with income generated by other assets. It's an asset swap. They traded income streams for equity. And at the end, they have more total assets than they started with. This is why wealthy people are obsessed with acquiring income-generating assets first. Because once you have enough assets generating income, you can buy whatever you want without ever touching your principal capital. Most people work their whole lives converting their labor into cash, and then cash into possessions. Wealthy people convert cash into assets, and then asset income into possessions. The difference is everything. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. The second strategy I call borrowed leverage. And this one is absolutely crucial to understand. Wealthy people are constantly borrowing money to buy things. But not the way you think. Here's what most people don't realize. When you have significant assets, banks will lend you money at extremely low interest rates. We're talking 2 to 4% annually, and they'll do it without requiring you to sell anything. Let me paint you a picture. You're wealthy. You own $10 million in stocks. These stocks are growing at about 8% per year on average. That's $800,000 in growth annually that you don't have to pay taxes on until you sell. Now you want to buy something. Maybe a house for $2 million. The normal approach would be to sell $2 million worth of stocks. But here's the problem. The moment you sell, you trigger capital gains taxes. Maybe you pay $400,000 in taxes. So you actually had to liquidate $2.4 million in stocks to buy a $2 million house. But here's what wealthy people do instead. They go to the bank and say, "I'd like to borrow $2 million using my stock portfolio as collateral." The bank sees $10 million in assets and happily lends the money at 3% interest. Now watch the math. The stocks continue growing at 8%. That's $800,000 per year in growth. The loan costs 3% of $2 million, which is $60,000 per year in interest. The stocks are earning $800,000 while the loan costs $60,000. Net result? The wealthy person is still getting richer by $740,000 per year. They bought a $2 million house and somehow ended up richer than if they hadn't bought it, because they never sold the appreciating assets. They just borrowed against them at rates lower than the assets grow. This is the secret. Wealthy people almost never sell assets to buy things. They borrow against assets, keep the assets growing, and the growth pays for both the purchase and the interest on the loan. It sounds like magic, but it's just math. And banks love doing this because the loan is secured by assets worth way more than the loan amount. Everyone wins. Except the person who doesn't understand this and keeps selling their assets to buy things. The third strategy is what I call business expense optimization. And this one is particularly powerful if you own any kind of business. Let me show you exactly how this works. When you buy something as an individual, you pay for it with after-tax dollars. That means if you want to buy a $50,000 car, you actually need to earn about $70,000 before taxes to have $50,000 left over. But here's what changes when you own a business. Suddenly, many purchases can become legitimate business expenses. And business expenses come out of pre-tax money. This completely changes the math. Let's say you need a car for your business. Could be a consulting business, a real estate business, anything where you meet clients or travel for work. You buy that same $50,000 car through your business. The business pays $50,000. But because it's a business expense, it reduces your taxable income by $50,000. If you're in a 35% tax bracket, that saves you $17,500 in taxes. So the real cost to you was only $32,500. Same car, same benefit to you, but 40% cheaper. And here's where it gets even better. The business can depreciate that car over time. Write it off over several years, further reducing taxes. But wealthy people take this way further. The car is just the beginning. Office space, travel, technology, meals with clients, professional development, education. Even some entertainment can be legitimate business expenses if properly documented. I'm not talking about tax fraud here. I'm talking about understanding that wealthy people structure their lives so that many of their purchases serve both personal and business purposes. And when something serves the business, the government subsidizes about 30 to 40% of the cost through tax deductions. The person working a regular job pays full price for everything with after-tax money. The person who owns a business pays 30 to 40% less for many of the same things. Over a lifetime, this difference is absolutely massive. This is why wealthy people are obsessed with owning businesses, not just for the income, but for the ability to make purchases with pre-tax dollars. The fourth strategy is the equity conversion play, and this might be the most misunderstood wealth-building technique out there. Here's what I mean. Wealthy people rarely buy things that depreciate. Instead, they find ways to buy things that appreciate, or at least hold value, and then they extract that value later without selling the asset. Let me give you a real example. A regular person wants a nice place to live. They rent an apartment for $3,000 per month. Over 10 years, they spend $360,000 on rent. At the end, they own nothing. A wealthy person wants the same nice place to live. They buy a condo for $500,000. They put $100,000 down and mortgage $400,000. Their monthly payment is also about $3,000. 10 years later, they've also paid about $360,000. But here's the difference. They now own equity. Maybe they've paid down $150,000 of the mortgage. Maybe the property appreciated to $650,000. They now have $400,000 in equity. But here's where the magic happens. They don't sell the condo. Instead, they go to the bank and say, "I'd like a home equity line of credit." The bank gives them access to a portion of that equity, maybe $200,000 they can borrow against. They take that $200,000 and buy another property, or invest it, or start a business. The first property continues appreciating, the second investment grows, and they're using the same $3,000 per month to maintain it all. After another 10 years, they repeat the process. Pull equity from both properties. Buy a third property. Now all three are appreciating. All three are building equity. All three give them access to more capital without selling anything. This is how wealthy people turn one purchase into an expanding portfolio of assets. They buy things that build equity, then they borrow against that equity to buy more assets. The assets appreciate, they borrow against the new equity. It's a snowball. The person who rented for 30 years paid over $1 million and owns nothing. The person who bought strategically also paid about $1 million, but now controls multiple properties worth several million. And they can access that wealth without selling anything. The fifth strategy is what I call the infinite return model. And this is where things get absolutely wild. Stay with me, because this might blow your mind. Here's the concept. Wealthy people find ways to buy assets where they eventually recover 100% of their initial investment while still owning the asset. Once you recover your initial investment, you own the asset for free. Your return becomes infinite. Let me make this concrete. You buy a rental property for $300,000. You put $60,000 down and mortgage $240,000. The rental income covers the mortgage, taxes, and expenses. After 10 years, you've paid down a bunch of mortgage, and the property has appreciated. Now the property is worth $450,000, and you owe $150,000. You refinance and pull out all your equity. That's $300,000. You just recovered all your initial investment plus more. But here's the crazy part. You still own the property. The rental income still covers all the costs. You have $300,000 back in your pocket. And you own an asset that continues to appreciate and generate income. You bought something worth $450,000 and it didn't cost you anything. You recovered every penny you put in. This is the infinite return model. Now you take that $300,000 and buy another property. Repeat the process. In 10 more years, you pull all your money back out of that one too. Now you own 2 properties that cost you nothing. And you still have your original $300,000 to do it again. This is how wealthy people turn one good investment into an empire. They don't just buy assets. They buy assets that eventually pay them back while still producing income. It's the ultimate wealth hack. But here's what nobody wants to admit. And this is the really uncomfortable part. The entire financial system is designed to help wealthy people buy things without paying for them, while making everyone else pay full price for everything. Banks offer low-interest loans to people with assets, but high interest to people without. The tax code subsidizes business ownership but taxes wages heavily. Lenders will let you borrow against appreciated assets but not against your labor. The system rewards people who already have wealth and penalizes people trying to build it from scratch. This isn't a conspiracy. It's just how the system evolved. But the result is the same. The wealthy can acquire things while preserving and growing their capital. Everyone else has to spend their capital to acquire things. And here's the part that keeps most people trapped. You can't use these strategies until you have capital to begin with. You need assets before you can borrow against them. You need a business before you can expense through it. You need equity before you can extract it. So there's this brutal catch-22. The strategies that let wealthy people buy things without depleting wealth require wealth to start, which means the gap keeps growing. Let me tell you about David. David's a smart guy. Works in finance, makes $180,000 per year. He wants to upgrade his life, buy a nice car, get a better apartment, take good vacations. David saves up $30,000 and buys a luxury car. Feels great. He upgrades his apartment to a nicer building. Rent goes from $2,000 to $3,000 per month. He takes 2 nice vacations per year, $5,000 each. 5 years go by. David's been making great money. But somehow he has almost nothing saved. His car is now worth $15,000. His apartment gave him 0 equity. The vacations are just memories. He spent about $300,000 over 5 years and has essentially nothing to show for it. David can't figure out what went wrong. He makes good money, he's not reckless, but he's been converting his income directly into consumption and depreciating assets. Every dollar he spent is gone forever. He has to keep working to maintain his lifestyle. Here's what David doesn't realize. He's playing the consumption game, earning money, spending money, repeat. He feels wealthy because he has nice things, but he's actually broke, one job loss away from disaster. Now let me tell you about Rachel. Rachel makes about the same as David, $170,000 per year. She also wants a nice life, but she approaches it completely differently. First year, Rachel keeps her expenses low. She drives a 10-year-old car, lives in a decent but not fancy apartment. She banks $80,000, invested in index funds. Year 2, she does it again. Now she has $170,000 invested. This is generating about $10,000 per year in dividends and growth that she can access. Year 3, Rachel wants a nicer car, but instead of buying it with savings, she takes a loan at 4% interest. The payments are $600 per month. She pays this from the dividends her investments generate. Her actual savings continue growing. Year 4, Rachel wants a better living situation. She buys a small condo instead of renting, puts $50,000 down. The mortgage payment is about the same as her old rent, but now she's building equity instead of throwing money away. Year 5, Rachel takes a nice vacation, but she pays for it with credit card points earned from business expenses. The vacation costs her almost nothing out of pocket. 5 years in, Rachel has over $300,000 invested. She owns equity in a condo worth maybe $80,000. Her investments generate $15,000 per year in passive income. She's driving a nice car that her assets paid for, and she's taken the same vacations David did. Same income, same time period, completely different outcome. David converted everything to consumption. Rachel built a machine that generates income. Now Rachel's machine can buy things for her while David has to work for every purchase. The difference wasn't discipline. It wasn't sacrifice. It was understanding that every dollar has a choice. It can buy consumption, or it can buy an asset that generates income forever. Here's what most people don't realize. Buying things doesn't make you poor. The way you buy things makes you poor. If you convert capital into consumption, you'll always be broke no matter how much you earn. But if you convert capital into assets first, those assets can buy consumption for you forever. Think about what happens over 20 years with each approach. David keeps earning and spending. He probably makes several $1,000,000 over his career and ends up with almost nothing. Maybe a retirement account and some home equity if he's lucky. Rachel builds an asset base that generates enough passive income to cover her entire lifestyle. After 20 years, she might have $2 million invested, generating $100,000 per year. She doesn't need her job anymore. Her assets can buy everything for her. It's not actually about rich versus poor. It's about understanding the game. Most people play the earning and spending game. A few people play the asset accumulation game. And the asset accumulation game has a completely different rule set. The asset swap, borrowed leverage, business expense optimization, equity conversion, and infinite return strategies aren't secrets. They're just patterns. Patterns that anyone can learn and apply once they have the capital to start. Here's the brutal truth though. You can't use these strategies until you stop playing the consumption game. You have to accumulate assets first, build that foundation, and that means living below your means for a while. Not forever, just long enough to build the machine. This is where most people fail. They want to live the lifestyle now. They want the nice car and the nice apartment and the vacations right away, so they spend their capital on consumption and never build the asset base that would let them have all those things for free later. The wealthy figured out delayed gratification leads to permanent gratification. They'll live modestly while building assets, then let the assets buy them whatever they want, forever. The middle class wants instant gratification, so they consume now and struggle forever. The asset swap, borrowed leverage, business expense optimization, equity conversion, and the infinite return model aren't magic tricks. They're just strategies for buying things with asset income instead of labor income, for preserving capital while acquiring possessions, for turning purchases into wealth instead of expenses. The question isn't whether these strategies work. They obviously do. The question is whether you're willing to delay consumption long enough to build the asset base that makes them possible. Can you drive the OK car for 5 more years while investing aggressively? Can you live in the smaller apartment while saving for a down payment? Can you skip the fancy vacations now so you can take unlimited vacations later funded by passive income? Most people can't. Not because they're weak, but because they've been taught that earning more is the solution. That the next raise will fix everything. That lifestyle comes first and savings come later. But that's backward. Assets come first. Then assets buy lifestyle. That's the order. That's always been the order. The people who figure this out become wealthy. The people who don't, keep working forever. Now you know the game. You see how wealthy people buy things without ever really paying for them. You understand it's not about having more money. It's about using money differently. The choice is yours. Keep converting income to consumption and stay on the treadmill forever. Or start building assets that can eventually buy everything for you. Same effort, same income. Completely different life.